Bridges, with your host, Donnie Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Hey there, good Sunday morning. It's Bridges, and I'm so glad to have you with us today. We are talking today about whether it makes a lot of sense to continue to invest in the core community of this city. The reason we're talking about that is that we spent the last several weeks talking about the impact of poverty on this community, and whether or not to put money in the core community is a vital question when you are considering the larger question of poverty. We are talking to two folks who know this subject very well. I'd like to introduce them to you now. You should all know Pete Culp, who was a community activist of long standing, been on every possible board and committee that has anything to do with revitalizing the city of Toledo. I would give you all of those names, but we'd be here until next Sunday getting that done. So welcome, Pete. I'm so glad to have you here. Pete made me chase him to get here, by the way. He's a very reluctant public figure. Also, we have Hugh Grief. Hugh is the executive director of LISC, and I'm going to let Hugh tell you all about LISC in just a second, but suffice it to say right at this moment that LISC is one of the key organizations when it comes to looking at the import of community development. Is that fair?
We try to make that impact, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started this morning, gentlemen. Good. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Now, I know you're not shy, so I don't have to tell you, Pete, right. You know, I know you're not shy, so all right. So here is the question. Does it make sense to continue to invest in the core of this city?
Yes.
Of course.
All right, we can all go home now. Of course.
Yes.
I'm going to say maybe it does and maybe it doesn't.
Well, I think, Donnie, there is some talk going around about whether we're spending good money after bad money and so forth. But one of the things that is missing that I think sometimes people look at poverty and the central city as it just happened. It's been there a long time. The neglect has been there for decades. So when you come up with solutions to try to address these issues, they're not going to happen overnight or in 1 year.
So when we're talking about core cities, core neighborhoods, are we talking about just the central city? Are we talking about the north side, the old south end?
Any area that has a targeted population of low-income people as a base.
About 1 of every 3 Toledo residents today lives in one of those neighborhoods that we would call the core city. Interestingly, the downtown market is now the fastest growing residential area in all of Toledo. Yeah. And it's one of the areas where we're having economic diversity happen, which is a very important thing too, so that you're starting to see people who have economic choice choosing to move back into the city, although many of them are moving into lofts and those kinds of things. Very, very importantly, 1 of 3 Toledoans is a figure that we can't ignore. If we think we can, then we must also as a community decide that we like the fact that we have the highest concentration of poverty among American cities and a whole host of other similar kinds of horrible data that comes out when people like the Brookings Institute compare cities.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to our ability to compete? What are we doing to the quality of life for all residents in Toledo?
Pete?
Yeah, I think we need to look at these areas of concentration as a total community. It is not a Hispanic problem. It's not an African American problem. It's not just a poor white problem. It's a problem that is all of our problem. And I think if we could learn to collaborate on certain types of issues and initiatives, part of the problem is we spend money on the symptoms of poverty rather than the actual cause that we eliminate so that those go away. I think also, Donnie, just for a quick update, when you develop a plan to be instituted, you must do one of 2 things. One, you have to do community organization so that people are part of the solution as well. You have to empower residents of these neighborhoods as you work toward the solutions of making their quality of life improve. And the second thing, I think, is that federal money is beginning to decrease. So why hasn't the city developed a methodology to pick up and spend general fund monies in a collaborative fashion with
City of Toledo.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of questions then I have for you. Is there? I always I get the sense I'm a planner. I'm a pretty pragmatic A to Z kind of girl. So I'm always first looking for the plan. Is there a plan for redeveloping the core cities?
There are the kind of plan that LISC really thinks is the most empowering approach we call quality of life planning.
Tell folks what LISC is quickly.
LISC stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation. We're the largest community development support corporation in the United States. We operate in 31 cities and about 100 rural communities. And every year we move roughly $1 billion of resource, principally for development purposes, real estate, into the communities where we work. In Toledo, we've brought $93 million into the core of Toledo. And we are working with a number of large agencies now that have transformative projects that we'll try to bring resources to help them do.
So is there a plan or no?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, there is a plan?
yes.
Because it doesn't appear to be a plan.
Well, let me say it like this. There have been what they call 5-year plans under the block grant program. And then what happened is 2 or 3 of the CDCs did not follow the advice that was given them. There was a lack of management skills and so forth. Anyway, once they, like for example, Onyx and didn't get funded. They were appropriated in 2009, but they haven't had any money since 2007. And again, I think the picture that is being painted, I'd like to correct for a moment, real quick. One,
Okay, so
yeah.
so Onyx, a CDC is a Community Development Corporation, for
right.
those folks who aren't
Oh,
aware of that,
sorry,
and
yeah.
Onyx is a Community Development Corporation, or was,
right.
that had the responsibility of developing housing and other things in the core central city.
Right.
Yeah.
Then Warren Sherman was another CDC that, and the only reason that I need to say this, that the management that came in to help those agencies, especially as it related to tax credit housing, there are 2 problems with that, and there's 80% success, but the Blade has wrote about 20% that gave it a bad picture. But one,
So that's a really important point, if I can interrupt,
Sure.
because we who read the Blade really are left with the impression that all of those initiatives are failures, patent failures. That is not the
true.
case.
That's right.
That is not the case.
And those that were, I think if we could just for a minute, when you don't get funding by the syndicators that give you money for reserves, it allows that property then to
diminish.
deteriorate.
That's right.
But I think he was right. We need to bring more training, and so that the accountability for CDCs is up to par. We don't want people coming in and exploiting them because they don't know a lot about tax credits and how that actually function.
But you know what, Peter, at the end of the day, you guys, this is what people see when they drive through core cities. They see neighborhoods that are not well kept in some instances, certainly not in all instances.
That's true.
I live in the core city and our neighborhood is very well kept. We see what looks like a lack of attention to houses and the neighborhoods by the people that live in those neighborhoods. So I think in one of the articles that Keith Burris, who's a columnist for the Blade, wrote, he talked about a program out of New York that Jeffrey Canada had started, actually called the Community Pride Initiative. And the core of this initiative was that you build the pride in the community with the residents of the community, and they are the ones then that are the foundation of the development of those neighborhoods.
That's the empowerment.
We absolutely agree
That's right.
with
Thank
that.
you. That was the
I
empowerment.
think Pete
Thank
and I would say the same thing. In fact, right after we finish our conversation here, I'm going to a neighborhood, Junction Avenue and Blum, and we've got a bunch of neighborhood residents who want to clean up and beautify a vacant lot where school kids have to walk every day to go to Pickett Elementary School. We said, great, then what we'll do is we'll make this our LISC AmeriCorps Day of Caring. And so we're going to be out working with neighbors, helping to make a better place for kids to walk. This is exactly the kind of engagement that each neighborhood ought to have as often as it can. And one of the things we're trying to do, the reason we like quality of life planning, is that that is a mechanism that lets all sorts of people in communities get around the table and say, okay, what do we ought to do about kids walking to school, and what about safety, and how about, and you start developing an agenda for change in your community.
Well, if there is all of this community interest in these neighborhoods by the residents, how did these neighborhoods get in the
Shape they're in now.
in the shape that they're in now?
Yeah.
And you know, you're building, we're building houses like Bill Farnzel's place. I can never remember the name
Legacy
of it.
Home, Neighborhood Works?
Neighborhood Works,
Yeah.
right. Neighborhood Works is a CDC building houses again on the Cherry Street
Yes.
quarter, central sort of quarter. Beautiful houses, it looks like going up. But again, there were beautiful houses there that were built 5 years ago, 7 years ago, that are now in shambles. So if this process is working, if it's important, why isn't it working? It's an awkward
I'm
question.
I would say it is working.
Yeah.
All right.
We had, I think Pete
It
was
doesn't
correct.
look like it's working.
Well, that's because if you drive down certain streets, you will see the results of the failure of management to pay attention and get it done. But I could take you and show you lots and lots of other examples where they're actually fine. And they're in the same markets. It really comes down to what that organization really took on as its responsibility and how they paid attention. It's that simple. In the end, we have 80% of all of those homes that were built with that financing tool, which is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, are well occupied, they're doing great, they're in good shape, and they will be fine.
Well, you know what? You guys have been heavily
There's 800
involved
and
in.
some out of those homes throughout
You
the
guys have
city.
been involved in the city and county government for a really, really long time, and we're going to go to break now. But when we come back, I want to find out why there isn't more synergy around this plan. Why aren't people working together? I'm feeling like other folks are feeling like, you know, we're wasting taxpayers' money at a time when there just isn't a whole lot of money to waste because, you know, you all can't quite get it together. So we will be back in just a second. Please don't go away.